get everybody's question, and we can have, one second, Jenny? We can have follow-up answers that are, I like your style, concise if we can, but of course elaborate if you must. We want to hear from you. But I'd love to get to everyone, because usually we end up running out of time, and I want to get everybody today, so.
Right, I also just want to suggest when you have that many questions, if your question is a follow-up on the other person's question, raise your hand rather than, right, because that would.
Yes, okay, and that's true. If your question's been asked, then we'll just move along. And then we'll go around again if we have time, so.
Okay, I'm gonna try and fit this all into one question.
Could you say your name and
I'm
where
sorry,
you're
Leslie
located, or where you're
Gallagher.
from?
Here in Kingston. Okay. First of all, I want to thank you both and appreciate the information that you dispersed amongst us. And here's my question. Well, first I'll say my concern. My concern is domestic violence, and I've been reading a lot about how women in particular, not necessarily so, but in particular are immigrant women, are afraid to report domestic violent crimes because of exactly what we spoke of here today. And it's a big concern to me because of, needless to say, the safety of that woman and the safety of possibly children. How do we educate this particular population, mostly Latino? How do we educate them as to your procedure of arrest and of all that we've learned today? How do you recommend we educate the community?
Probably much more experience.
Well, I was going to say, you can learn the process by getting arrested, but we don't suggest that. I guess our biggest way to get out to the community is our school resource officers. You know, they speak to the kids on a daily basis. The kids trust the school resource officers, whether they're sheriff's deputies or whether they're Kingston cops or sororities or any other agencies that has school resource officers. That's our way to make contact.
And just a little piece of this. Isn't there a database that if you arrest someone, you can look up prior crimes?
If you get arrested, automatically they'll run what they call a 513, 515 is your criminal history. So, once you get arrested, automatically your criminal history has to go into your arrest report.
Okay, so then you have knowledge of the person you arrested, you have knowledge of past crimes.
Correct.
So you, how can I word this? You have a choice, really, not according to your philosophy, but you do have a choice if someone's committed a violent crime as opposed to, say, a vehicular crime, to call it into ICE.
No. No matter what your crime is, the policy is we call it, if you're not, if you weren't born in the United States, we give that information to ICE. That's all we give them, that you were born somewhere else. And we don't care what the crime is.
But isn't that only
If you
if
made
they
it
go
through our
to
back
jail?
door, excuse me?
Isn't that only if they go to jail?
Yes.
That does not if you send them home after.
No, if I
they
arrest you
travel.
up for a class A misdemeanor and I'm just giving you an appearance ticket, we still get your criminal history, but we don't share anything on that with anybody.
Okay,
But if it's a follow-up to it.
so how about if we consensual, let's be consensual here. How do we do this? Because I know this is
I think that's helpful to follow.
okay, well, I just want to get to everyone. So if this leads us along, then we should, I don't want to, yeah. Yes.
Sheriff, this is a clarification, because now I understand something very clearly, but you referenced something about only if they're locked up for something terrible.
Maybe the words I use might not have been very good.
Yeah.
If you get locked up, whatever, the judge is the only person that can lock you, put you in our custody as a judge. So you get arrested no matter what you get arrested for. If a judge decides that he's going to incarcerate you, then that information gets sent to ICE, that's all. Yeah, I misunderstood.
Yeah, okay, got clarified in her question.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. As long as you come through the back door, when you get asked that question, if you weren't born in the United States, ICE gets told that somebody's here that's not born.
And is it also regarding that, I have a very personal experience of someone being picked up out of probation. So they weren't picked up out of jail,
Right.
they were picked up out of probation.
Yeah, that happens. We run the security division at probation. So if somebody comes in, they probably had a warrant or probation, told them, to, there to be some kind of charge, you don't just get taken off.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, we do the same thing at DSS, we
Yeah.
do security at DSS,
Yeah.
occasionally somebody comes in.
Yeah.
Just to get off topic for a little bit, last year, we put a computer in there, and we file checked everybody that came in. You had to have positive photo ID when you came to DSS. And we were getting people who, on a monthly, the first month we locked up 30 people that were coming there that were wanted individuals. Well, the legislature and the ACLU and AARP and a couple other organizations didn't like that we were doing that. Even though it was illegal to do, the commissioner of DSS was happy that we were doing it. But we stopped because there was such an outcry. But the point I'm trying to make is all the buildings we do security in, you know, we keep an eye out for people. If there's a warrant, we'll take you into custody.
Sheriff, why did you decide to set up there to do that?
Because the way we were doing it before, nobody has to show any ID, and it's back to that way. You don't have to show any ID to come into DSS. You go in, you have to empty your pockets and all that stuff, walk through the metal detector. You don't have to ID yourself. The deputies that were out there had a warrant list about 30 pages long, so if they thought that was so-and-so, they would look it up and see if it was on the list. So you can't go through an airport without showing your ID. You can't pretty much go anywhere anymore without showing your ID. So we thought it would be good to check people as they come in, and that it was working. And I also thought it would have been a deterrent from people who were wanted to now try and get in there and get benefits.
Thank you.
I just had a concern because people that ICE can have contact with haven't been proven guilty of anything.
No.
That's a concern of mine, is that ICE can become involved in something that they're not even guilty yet. So just going back to the fact that you don't ask what they're going to ask. Maybe there needs to be some kind of documentation, just in the records of what ICE wants to speak to them about. I think that we have that kind of right, that we shouldn't just allow people to be questioned when they're not really guilty of something yet. You know, like there's like a step that's been taken that maybe shouldn't have been taken yet. You know, do you see what I'm saying?
Well, can I
Is that there's no guilt there yet?
The majority of the inmates that are at the facility, there's no guilt.
Yeah.
The ones that are sentenced are
See,
not a
that's
big
what
part of
because
it.
we could all be thrown in jail for
The
something.
majority of the inmate population aren't sentenced.
Yeah, and I think that there's just such, and it's not, a part of this is the general climate that's out there now, that we have, there's so many crazy things going on, that we also know that some bad things can take place when there's crazy things going on. So the documentation to me becomes extremely important as to, okay, so what is gonna be, is there something on film? Do they just go in, do they just talk to these people?
Right, there's an interview room, the
Yeah.
inmate
And
is
if
given
they're not
the,
guilty yet of something, I
right,
just.
but any police agency, any police officer can come in and talk to any inmate, if the inmate wants to talk to them. If you don't wanna talk to them, you don't make it through the front door.
Yeah.
So I would just say if I was in there and ICE came to talk to me, I would assume it's got something to do with immigration, an issue like that.
And are they told that they
Excuse me?
can talk to them or they don't have to
Yes.
talk to them?
Yes, and they have to ID themselves. The form tells you the agency that the person is from.
Jenny, did you?
No, I was going to say, I think it's a very important point that you make, that if there is fear in the community about their rights, then there needs to be education about what they are and are not required to volunteer. So for instance, when I lived abroad, I always carried a copy of my ID with me. In fact, I have like a legal one, you know, my passport. Even in Italy, I was arrested once for not carrying my passport. We cleared that up with the embassy, but many hours later. But it reminded me of our rights here, which are that you don't actually have to carry ID. You do, for example, in the airport, you have to show your ID. So it's important for people to know those rights, and that is a part of the education that we both agree. And I also just wanted to point out that in the ACLU list of items, everything but 3, 6, and 5 that we just talked about are, besides when someone is detained and comes out of jail, whether guilty or not, the sheriff does agree to that, but they're not, there's no unlawful search or seizure without judicial warrant, that sort of thing. So that, I think we agree, is not happening. So you're not referring to those items, are you? You're just referring
I'm
to...
just referring to, people being unduly questioned about something when they're not guilty of anything I mean, I can see that local law enforcement needs to do their job, and when all of a sudden somebody else is getting involved, that has nothing to do with the actual crime, right? That maybe there needs to be documentation as to at what point does this person from another agency need to speak with this person who's not guilty yet? You know, do you see what I'm saying?
I do, we would never ask. And we get not only, and ICE doesn't come to our facility all that often to talk to inmates, but other agencies do, and we might lock somebody up for committing a larceny or something. Well, now Dutchess County wants to come over and talk to them because they've had larcenies and the same method was taking place over there. So we wouldn't ask them why you want to talk to a guy from Dutchess County.
But that's
We
like
wouldn't
another
stop it.
law enforcement agency related to the same type of crime. This is an immigration setup asking to talk when they're not involved in that crime at this point, because
Yeah.
nobody's guilty of it.
You're not the only person that has said that before. And then I say, well, what about the FBI wants to come in and talk to you? Are we gonna say, no, you can't because the person didn't get found guilty?
Well, I'm not saying no, you can't. I think
Yeah.
at that point, it just has to be documented.
Yeah, we'll
For our
document,
safety. you
we'll
know.
document that an agency came, and it doesn't matter what the agency is, the process is the same. We'll document that you came there, but we won't ask your reason.
I just thought,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think we would all agree that one of the purposes of law enforcement is to protect the public. That said, the question of protect the public, who's the public and protect from what? And I take your point that sometimes there happens to be an immigrant who gets, is released and then goes and does something bad. I heard you say that. But there is also the issue of how law enforcement protects immigrants who are thought of as, I forget your exact terminology, being undocumented, who are spoken of as being undocumented.
Criminals or illegals or using
Right.
that
And so
language.
my question really is, what the role of local law enforcement is in protecting the rights of people who are undocumented. There is a lot of, there are people with a lot of power who are talking about rounding people up. It's not just that all of a sudden everybody got paranoid. There is something in the air now that wasn't in the air before that talks about immigrants as people who should be forced to leave. And there are real stories of people being required to leave the country, leave their children, leave, the life that they have. That is happening. And there are protections, including at the federal level. I mean, one of the laws we haven't talked about very much is the Fourth Amendment. So my question really is what the Sheriff's Department thinks about your obligation to protect the residents of Ulster County from illegal search and seizure, for example, from other kinds of invasions of privacy, from things from rights that they have as residents of the United States, whatever their immigrant status is.
Right. We treat everybody the same. And if there's search and seizure, there has to be probable cause, there has to be reason, suspicion. If it's a search incident to an arrest, you don't need a warrant. If it's a search of your house, I can't go in your house, I have to have a warrant to go in your house. I have to have a warrant to go into your car unless that's part of the arrest and you were in your car when we arrested you. So we treat everybody the same. Everybody's given their Miranda warnings, right the same. We don't care where you're from or who you are or what you are. Everybody's treated the same. The only difference is if you're in this country and you weren't born in this country, we still have not asked you your status. You could be born in Switzerland, but you could be a U.S. citizen. So all we ask you is where you were born. We don't ask you if you're here illegally or not. Our only involvement is that we know about it.
So to the degree that there is that there is a threat and a certain amount of growing evidence that ICE and Border Patrol and those agencies are skating somewhat scarily on the border of violating things like the Fourth Amendment. What is your sense of what your what your role protecting Ulster County residents
Yeah,
against
I
that.
can't say that I think they're violating people's rights. I know that they're a lot more aggressive now since there's been a new president. We haven't had any involvement with them other than the involvement we've had forever. We haven't gotten involved in any operations with ICE. We've had custom enforcement and border patrol guys work with our drug team, but it had nothing to do with immigration. We invite ICE to go along with us. Occasionally we do operations in these massage parlors. You know, there's a lot of human trafficking that goes on, and that's of interest to ICE. So we take them if we're doing an operation, undercover operation to a massage parlor, and invite them to come along. But other than to say that they're definitely more aggressive since the new president came in, I don't know if they're violating anybody's rights or not. We don't get involved with them.
Sir?
Yeah, a person has the right to say no to any interview from the outside. Are there any consequences that you know of to saying no?
No. No.
I mean, do you follow up on that, or?
Well, there's nothing for us to follow up on. If we want to interview you and you say no, then that's the end of it. There's no coming back to you again the next time and say, hey, you sure you want to talk?
No, I'm just saying if ICE comes, says we want to talk to this person, the person refuses. If ICE is waiting somewhere else for them to come out.
Yeah, ICE won't get in there unless we let them in and the inmate has to say yes. When the inmate leaves, if ICE is out there waiting for them, then that's on ICE, it's not on us.
Is there, but just I would like to know though how our sheriff's department works with the community, their constituents, to protect them in the case of that. That sounds, if I understand the question, very threatening, because that means once you leave, you know, your office, they're fair game, which sounds disjointed to me.
Well, it's not only ICE. Once you're out of our custody, anybody can come get you if they have an interest in you. You know, when your time is up and you're out the back door. Or you get bailed out and then you're out the back door. And that's really the end of our interest in you as far as the correction facility goes.
Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Gladys Figueroa. I want to thank you both. This is wonderful. I'm a retired New York City police officer, so I understand exactly what you're saying. It is not easy at all to deport someone. I personally, with my partner, we took someone into immigration. And unless that person had committed a big crime, they told us, take him back, we have nothing to do with him. But there is a lot of fear. And my concern is anyone here reaching out to the community that is actually affected by this? I don't know. Is anybody reaching out to the Latinos community? I know Dyson's, I love Dyson's, the bakery.
Who do you mean anyone? Are you talking to the sheriff's department?
Anyone here. I see a lot of people here, a lot of agencies. Is anybody reaching out to the communities that are actually affected by this?
So there's a Mano a Mano coalition, which is essentially supporting especially Latino, but also all immigrant communities. And the Catholic Charities has coordinated their the outreach, and I've been in touch with them many times and attended many meetings with them. So they're, and I know many of their leaders and have talked with them about what we're doing, but I wouldn't say that it is an official outreach, let's say, like Ulster County, I don't know about the sheriff's office.
I like to make one more statement. One of the things that we did.
But can we just get, I'm curious what the sheriff's office has done in terms of outreach on these issues.
For our outreach, we never say no. If somebody asks the sheriff's office to come to a forum like this, no matter what it's about, we send somebody. We'll send somebody that has knowledge of what the forum is about. So do we go places and say, hey, can we come and speak? We haven't done that. And again, it's our school resource officers. The event we just had yesterday in Midtown Kingston, we had at least 5 of our people there, from the dive team interacting with the community. So that's really our research.
I'd like to make one more statement. One of the things that we also did in the city, we had a problem where the Mexicans were being targeted. And so the local bodega, grocery store went to, that was their main connection. And, you know, you have a right to report crime, even if you're undocumented. You know, people believe that they don't have to report crimes. You're not going to get deported, you haven't committed a crime because you're here, the police officer is going to protect you. But there is that fear. Just one more question is, since Trump has been in office, with this issue, have officers had a sensitivity training regarding this issue?
We have not. We have sensitivity training on other stuff. We have not talked about immigration because as far as we're concerned, it's never an issue. You know, when we deal with somebody, everybody, if you're a victim of a crime, everybody gets a crime victim assistance card. So, we treat everybody the same.
So
I
maybe
don't know if
that's,
that was a good answer.
no, it's fine. I think it's good to know that it hasn't occurred. And how can we maybe speak more about ways that it could, right?
And I'm glad you said, that there's a big difference between a county police agency and a city police agency. Not only just New York City, but here in Kingston, if that's where the majority of the people are, we don't deal that much with the city of Kingston. We're in the outside, we try and police in areas that have only part-time police agencies or no police agencies. Unless we get a call for service. If KPD calls us and wants us to do something, for sure we would come. So our interactions on a daily basis are other than traffic stops, are pretty slim when it comes to undocumented individuals. And then after that, it's only if you get arrested and locked up.
Jenny?
I just wanted to ask, and I don't want to slow things down, but since New Paltz has just passed this very stringent, I don't know how many of you have read, that they've passed a sort of complete no cooperation, right? And there was, and I think it was precipitated very much by the situation where ICE detained a gentleman, I forget his name. What was his name?
Joel.
Whose wife was pregnant. He had had a long ago minor infraction. If you could just speak to how the sheriff's department will work or would work with New Paltz, and also maybe on that matter.
Well, we work with every agency. We'll never say no if an agency calls us and asks for assistance. I don't know enough about that case at all. I was surprised that Chief Snyder let the resolution go through. I don't even know if he even spoke on it in front of the town boards. But there's also a difference between being a chief of police and an elected sheriff.
Okay.
So they might have more power. The police commission, which oversees the police department in New Paltz, is the town board. So there's not even, a sort of an outside person looking into the police agency, it's the town board. But I think also that the chief is going to do just what we do here, because he doesn't have a jail. So he's not going to do all the stuff that they want in their resolution, he doesn't do anyway. So if ICE calls him, I don't know, I would be surprised if he says no. And if he does, then either us or the state police would be the next agency that they would call.
You're next.
Yeah, I just had a question regarding integration, for, political refugee status. Like, I've been recently trying to volunteer either through World Church Service or Catholic Relief, Catholic Charities. I don't really understand the track. If somebody is trying to come legitimately for political refugee reasons into the U.S., kind of how that integrates into the community on both the law enforcement level and, like, for example, if somebody's coming and they're being placed, is local police informed, and how does that process occur? Is it all just going through the churches? That's what it seems like to me. Like, there's no...
We don't get informed on any of that. So if somebody's a political refugee.
So if they just show up, like, for lack of a better comparison, via Underground Railroad approach in the city of Kingston, and they just show up on the street corner, where would the police department then take that?
You mean if they were looking for assistance?
Well, yeah, I mean, if they're really trying to get in for political reasons, they made it to the shore.
Yeah, if it's during normal business hours, Monday through Friday, we would send them down to DSS if there was.
The DSS?
Yeah, now if it's nighttime or a weekend and you don't have any food or you need a place to stay, the Darn Shut Shelter is a good resource for us. Family of Woodstock's a good resource for us. We'll find something for you.
So that's what
Right, we won't ask you any questions about your.
And then those organizations would kind of take it from there.
And they don't ask, I don't think any of those agencies
So they're
ask
just,
your status either.
so it wouldn't be like a call to immigration?
No.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question, just a little bit more clarification about what happens when somebody's in your custody. Say, for instance, I accused him, he's an undocumented alien, I accused him of attacking me with a knife. I call you, you pick him up, you put him in jail.
Judge has to put him in jail.
Well, so the judge thinks that what I said is enough to suspect that maybe he really did come at me with a knife. At that point, you would let ICE know.
If he answers the question where you were born, and if he says he was born outside the United States, yes.
So you would let them know.
Correct.
So-
We wouldn't ask
But
you.
I could have made this up because I'm mad at him.
Right,
So
but-
he didn't actually go after me with a knife.
okay.
Still, ICE will now know that he's there. So they can wait and pick him up when he comes out, regardless of whether or not he did anything violent.
Right.
Right.
You have to understand, you're swearing out the complaint, so if it turns out it's false,
But
not only
they won't
did
ever
you
get
cause
to
trouble
because
for
they're gonna
him.
take him away. So I don't have to worry about that.
No, but then you'll be taking his place inside.
No, you can't prove that I did anything wrong, because he's not gonna make it to the real court,
It's, you know,
because they're gonna get him before that, right?
It's in that situation there, it'd be incumbent upon the officers on the scene to make a determination whether anything actually happened or not. And if he did end up in our facility, yes, ICE would get notified.
And in the case of this incident you talked about in Long Island, where they let somebody out who was violent, and then they attacked and stabbed somebody and assaulted a child. That could just as easily happen to any violent offender. I mean, that's the problem with our system is nobody should have been let out, whether they were undocumented or not. But when you make a statement like that, that because he was undocumented, and that it somehow makes it sound as if undocumented people are more likely to be this kind of person
No, it
that
does
would
not.
do this.
What made him this type of person was his gang affiliation, MS-13, I think. The majority of the people, we haven't had any issues here where somebody that's here illegally got out and caused a crime. We've had guys, you know, that's the big issue with the orders of protection. We had a retired trooper got locked up for something. He bailed himself out with a credit card, and even though there's an order of protection in place, there was a fall down. The person that had that order didn't call Vine, or didn't know about Vine, so she didn't know that that person was getting released. He went, got a shotgun, and took her and himself.
Yeah.
So that's why Vine is so important. If you have any concerns about your protection against anybody, if they're incarcerated, Vine will track you down either by your phone, by your cell phone, by a text message. They'll track you down and let you know that this person's getting out.
And by the way, that went into effect by New York State law, what, 2003 or?
The State Sheriff's Association runs the Vine program.
Yeah.
What is Vine?
Stands for Victim Identification and Notification Every Day. Another one of those letters.
And the idea is that if you're someone who might be a victim or fear someone who might be released, that you at least know with their whereabouts.
George?
Okay, so I think I understand now your policy of contacting ICE. It's whenever a person has been arraigned. Arraigned means found, that he should be kept in jail. But what about a guy who can post bond, and he's been arraigned, he's going to go to trial, but he is released on bail? Do you still get their name and report them to ICE?
If he makes it through our back door, yes, ICE gets notified, but we won't hang on to it. If ICE, unless they send us a judicial warrant signed by a judge, a detainer can be signed by a federal ICE agent. And all that is a request that you tell us when the person's getting out.
Okay.
So if you come into the facility and you're only there for an hour and a half because you posted bond, ICE wouldn't even have got back to us by then whether they were interested in you or not.
Okay, but the detainer policy is a big issue now because it has been held that detainer where ICE is asked to keep the person for an extra 48 hours after they're supposed to be released.
We don't do that.
You don't do that at all?
We don't do that.
So
And I don't know if there's
And that's
a
in
sheriff's office in the state.
resolution, isn't it?
What's that?
The resolution says that, I guess, that you should not follow a detainer policy of giving an extra 48 hours after release.
We do not do that.
So you agree with the resolution on that?
Yes, we won't hold you if your time's up and you're getting released, you're going. Or if you post bond, you're going. We're not holding it.
But
But you
ICE is notified.
You notify
Yeah.
ICE of when the release will be so they can
Correct.
get there beforehand.
Right. If they're interested. All the detainers is a courtesy thing that we do for
clarification for me, and I'll try to make it pretty short, but you're saying that, you, I mean, in general, your office is reflecting New York State's authority, right? A lot of what you're doing is acknowledging New York State's expectations.
Well, if it goes back to the original question, where we get our authority from, is
Yeah,
from New York.
that's what I'm saying, authorized by New York State. Right. So within that, you're an elected position,
Correct.
and and you're saying you're not political. So this is
I
what
try not to be.
Right. So, but
Budget time.
when you come up for election and someone else might be running also, is that party affiliation? Are you independently as?
I'm a registered member of the Democratic Party, but,
But when you're running, are you being affiliated to a party?
well, the way the system's set up here in New York State, you're on the ballot as your affiliated party.
So you would think there'd be a Republican who would run against you?
Oh, I don't know.
But there could be.
Oh, sure.
So that's the one question. Then the question about that is, could someone who is elected as a Republican have a different, quality to their work that could be very different.
Sure.
So that is one of the things that I think education-wise, for me, is good to know. I mean, for example, we have, because of the federal government, and who's invested and who is running, like somebody, there might be money coming into somebody who would have a whole different philosophy to being the county police chief or sheriff. We've seen it from what we've heard and read, say like, our representative is bankrolled by somebody who wanted that representation to have a different quality. And that in New York State, that might be one way where we might have concern that who's bankrolling these people and could it change our relationship that we have with our sheriff that is saying, this is, I'm there with the community. That all of a sudden you have a different relationship, it's
Sure.
potential.
My philosophy, I don't have a dollar in a campaign account.
Right.
I just don't, so
But that's-
you don't have to worry about that with me.
No.
And if I run next year, people like the job that I've done, they'll vote, and if they don't, somebody else will do
I'm
it.
totally educated and, in terms of meeting you and getting you, it's like, this guy's okay in what he's saying here, but there might be a need for us to be wary of that.
I think that speaks to generally, campaign finance in general requires so much reform at every level. And it's not about whether our sheriff is in particular, immune or not immune to it, but in general, whether there's the power, which is why there is a certain importance in the independence of his role. And it is also important to know how the legislature goes with its, or at least determines its restrictive or permissive role in setting any policy of the sheriff. I think there's an important independence of that office.
Yeah,
So-
of the sheriff's office.
Yeah. So I think this is, we're gonna have to come to terms with the earlier debate that we had about, because in the scenario you described, if we had a legislature that was incredibly conservative, let's say, like, we know that we have a more conservative neighbor in Dutchess County, and they decided they wanted their sheriff to be even more restrictive than the sheriff wanted to be, that could pose a problem or concern for the population. So I think it's a very good question. I don't have an answer.
Yeah, well, I think these are
Except
good
there is
questions.
There is influence, maybe not here.
If I may also say, what I'm learning today too is that you're very process and law oriented, right? And so what I'm curious, just to follow up on that, is what would then be the difference between a Democrat or a Republican in terms of interpreting, how might it be different? When you said someone could come in and do it different, earlier what occurred to me was, but if we're just looking at the laws as they are, you could change the law, is that correct?
You can't change the law, you can change your policy and procedure, your rules and regulations, which are what, I make those decisions. If a new sheriff comes in and doesn't like a certain rule that we have, or a regulation, or a policy, then he'll change it. And there's no way nobody in our organization below the sheriff can say no, that they won't change it. It has
So
to
that's
be-
the tone.
Right.
The tone is that.
But I can also say, and I've worked for Republican sheriffs, I've worked for Democratic sheriffs, I think I even worked for a conservative sheriff at one time. Everyone who comes in has always left the place better than he found it. And that's the goal of whoever the sheriff is. Surround yourself with a bunch of good people and make it better during your time in office.
Hey, look, vintage. Town Lieutenant, which is one
Hey.
back here.
Control
So
that.
I'm going to bring it back to the resolution and body of text. In regard to the detainers and the information, on page 7, there's an enumerative list of requested information to be filed aggregated data. And so the question is, and that would be a semi-annual reporting requirement. So the question is that something that encroaches on procedure and policy within the sheriff's department? Or can that be construed as something that could be legislated from the legislature and a compulsion that is not an internal policy issue, but rather a reporting requirement on the detainers?
Hey, if they ask for that, they don't have to pass a local law or resolution to ask me how many detainers we have. I can almost tell you off the top of my head, because we look at it every day now. But, yeah, they don't have to, we do a yearly report. By code, by policy we do. Whether that has detainer information in it, I don't know. That's something we could add in, for sure, add into our yearly report that we give to the legislature. I know it wasn't in this year's report, we just finished it.
Amy?
I'm Amy Fraden. Glad to have you here, and
Thanks, Amy.
Jennifer, I always love you. I want to go back to what you asked, because I'm not sure that I understand. First of all, I want to say I'm cautiously excited because it sounds like this resolution kind of matches what you're already doing. That makes me excited because I think of the coming together of various law enforcement, powers in our county. But then I would get confused and think that you weren't into it or what. So what is I think it's very important that there's a consensus, between our law enforcement and our policymakers and the statement that it's making. So I just want to be clear on that. Are you guys with each other or not with each other on this, or I just don't understand.
The only place we're not with each other is whether we're going to let ICE know that there's a person in the facility, and we will continue to do that. Other than that, all the other stuff in there, we already do and have done.
That's very heartening. It was really helpful to hear you.
And I can speak for the other agencies in the county. I don't know anybody that has anybody ever asked their immigration status.
So it comes down to the basic disagreement on whether the legislature can set any form of policy regarding the sheriff. And as I just mentioned, there are probably, in a society where there could be autocratic rule, some danger to that, right? What if we had an autocrat running Ulster County who wanted to change everything that the sheriff did, and we had a Democratic sheriff who was duly elected? That would be a dangerous situation. So it's right that there is that he is elected, that he has that office and those powers. The question is whether there are certain restrictions that we can place, and the suggestion in the Attorney General, I think I will be calling the Attorney General's office tomorrow, because that passage is unclear. And we believe that we do have the right to set certain guidelines, like the voluntary or not voluntary information provided to us. So we do have to clear that up. But we are in agreement on I think, on the rest, yes.
That's great. And it feels really, I've said heartening to feel the sort of memorialized resolution of the intention of the Sheriff's Department. That's, just by virtue of the law.
Can I just point out to everyone that even though it's a memorializing resolution, which it technically is, that because it was started prior to the rule change, if you've been following that, we're allowed to proceed forward with it. If it were withdrawn, it could not be reintroduced until that rule is changed.
All right, we have time for 2 more questions. Who hasn't had a chance? Go on, sir.
I just, you're talking about the policies and as for interviewing and et cetera, that's all written, is that correct? You have a written policy book that could be reviewed, so it's
Yes.
all, and changing it would require change to the bunch of written policies?
Well, yes, and it can only come from the top. The sheriff's the only one that can authorize any kind of change.
Is there a legislative process for within the sheriff's department for you to make a change? Like, is there any checks and balances there?
No, it's, you know, the checks and balances is meeting with your staff and deciding whether you're making a good change, a bad change, and how it's gonna affect not only the sheriff's office, but how it's gonna affect the people that he works for, the taxpayers. So we don't change policy that often. As laws change, then we have to change policy if it's in conflict with the law. We have a company called Lexipol. Lexipol checks our policy against any changing laws so that we stay to the best standard practice throughout the United States. So they keep a good eye on it for us.
Would there be a way that the public would know, other than that there are some procedure, policy changes being made by the sheriff's department?
No, and most of them don't really have a direct effect on the taxpayer. It's policy procedure, how we go about our jobs, and our jobs are a lot of times controlled by just the way the laws are. So no, we don't notify when we change the policy.
Anyone else who has not? Yeah.
Sheriff, it's good to hear you talk. I've never met you, so this is very gratifying. You mentioned that the majority of people who are in our Ulster County Jail have not been sentenced. So do you have any numbers that you can?
Well, off the top of my head, I don't. I'm going to leave a stack of business cards here, so if anybody has a question that they didn't get to ask, or if you think of one later, my email address is on the bottom. Shoot me an email and I'll get the statistics for you. It might be in our year.
Yeah, in the 2015 report of the 2,168 inmates that were processed, sentencing was as follows. This is 2015. 1,305 male and 329 female were sentenced, so a total of, were not sentenced, sorry. So a total of 1,634. Okay, so those sentenced were only 205 out of the 2,168, so 10%, less than 10%. 10% sentenced. And this, by the way, is online. It's the sheriff's annual report.
Oh, okay.
And the next one will be available.
Yeah, we have it done. I haven't handed it to the legislature yet.
And you know, when we post our video, I'll do my best to make sure that all these links are within the context of the post so that you can access them. And we have to wrap it up for now. But
Well,
before-
actually, when the sheriff leaves, I'm glad to talk with you
Well,
about.
I'm not quite done.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I want to say is that I want to thank you both for making the time to be here today, and for everybody to be in attendance and to ask questions. The sheriff has to leave, but we're going to have a brief intermission. You can get a cup of coffee, you can use the bathrooms, and then I invite you back here within 15 minutes, where we'll have time with Jennifer to discuss and to go through the resolution and have more time for questions and answers with Jennifer. And I have the sheriff's cards, which I can pass out to you, and thank you very much. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Really informative. Thank you. I think it was. That's Gloria.
Yeah,